And welcome back into the Blue Horseshoe Podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. We are here on a Monday. In case you missed our show last week, a little bit of a wonky schedule this week specifically because of the OTA schedule. The Colts had their second media availability practice on Friday. So that's really mostly what today's podcast is going to cover. A lot of what George saw from Friday's practice. Also some breaking news on Breshad Perriman now officially signed with the Colts. So we'll get into that, what that means, why there's one area that I like a lot from this signing. But then we will, easy for me to say, also be back on Wednesday. So kind of a little doubleheader this week, George, because Wednesday is the final practice, OTA practice, open for the media. So the best way in kind of this different wonky week to stay up to date with everything Blue Horseshoe Pod-wise is by simply subscribing to the Blue Horseshoe Pod wherever you get your podcasts, and also on YouTube as well, Blue Horseshoe Pod. George, a lot to get into here from Friday. Let's start with Anthony Richardson. What a shock. I know people still want to talk about this guy. I can't believe it. I know you were shocked as well. But it is funny because there's still very little out there. Visually, we can see from Anthony Richardson in a Colts uniform. Big credit to Brent Bensley, who did record a video on Friday of Anthony Richardson doing a few basically footwork drills. He's going up and down through pads, rolling out left, rolling out right, having to hit certain targets and nets. And the video, at least that Brett put out there, Anthony Richardson was 2 for 2 in basically the scramble drill and hitting both nets. And why that is interesting to me, George, at least, is that obviously one of the areas that we've talked about with Anthony Richardson that needs to improve upon is accuracy. Now, again, we'll use the caveat we've been using the last few weeks. It is now June. It is very early. There's no defenders out there. He's throwing to a net that's not moving with no one covering him and no one in his face. Him hitting 2 nets, does that mean all of a sudden his accuracy issues are solved whatsoever? But it did lead me to ask you this question. Richardson, obviously, as we know, is a project. He has a lot that he has to work on here. What do you think for year number 1 is the biggest area you want to see growth in? Accuracy, footwork, decision-making, something like when you look at Richardson in year number 1, if you say, as we sit here after week 18, boom, he did this, and this was a massive improvement from now to the end of the season, which are you kind of looking at or hoping that that's the biggest improvement in his game?
I think the most important thing for him is just consistency, and that's tied into accuracy. I think that's the biggest area that you see it in. I think that's one of the things that video shows. You see flashes. There's moments out there where he looks really good. That was one of them on Friday's practice, where he's able to go down through that drill. And that's, the little bit of time that we've seen. I think this is 4th or 5th practice that we've seen him take part in, counting minicamp. There's 2 there. So, yeah, 4th or 5th.
So very little.
He's gotten better at that. Very little. Very, very little. And they're all, except for the 2 minicamp practices that were back-to-back, they're all at least a week apart. So you're seeing, one little snapshot of him in time. But that drill, you've seen progress, from day 1 in rookie minicamp to him nailing both of them the other day. He's just been more and more dialed in on that drill every time we see him. Doesn't hit it every time, but, first couple went over the net, as you would expect. There were struggles early in that. And then it just felt like more and more and more dialing that in. Got to see him start doing that now out there on the field. Again, the hardest thing for us is anything you do in life, if you check on it once a week, you don't know what's going on the rest of the week. There's 3 practices each week in these OTAs. We see one of them. They can script those however they want. They choose when we're out there. We may see the things he's strongest at right now. They may be trying to say, hey, these are the areas he's working best in. Let's make sure the media is out there for that. Who knows how all that's going? I do know the 7-on-7 drill Friday was probably the roughest drill I've seen him have in terms of since we've been out there. And that's where the consistency comes in. Just Minshew wasn't much better. The defense was really good in that drill on Friday. And I was told by some people who get to see a little more than we do, that's been pretty common, that the defense has been winning a lot of drills out there. So, take that for what it's worth. But a lot of that, some of those throws were off target. Some of them were good plays by the defense. Some of them were where they needed to be. It just goes back to the consistency. And then the 2-minute drive, which I think was one of the most telling things that we've gotten to see so far, because it's live. He was with the 2s. He was going against second defense, but it's live. to the extent that you're moving the ball. I mean, no one's getting tackled. Their pass rush was minimal. It wasn't a full out, all go pass rush, but they were moving the ball. They had the clock running. It was an end of the half situation. So you're okay with settling for a field goal. I mean, those things are good for context as far as what's going on. He moved the Colts pretty quickly down the field, got to the 18, and a lot of that was short and intermediate stuff, which I think is good. Quick passes that were coming out. They were on target. Guys were making them in stride. It's hard to tell. Defense wasn't all the way coming after him. There wasn't a pass rush. Would a receiver gotten further than he was blown down? Would he have gotten less? Those things are hard to tell when they're in shorts. So take all that for what it's worth. But once they got in the red zone, he had 2 passes. He had I can't remember which receiver it was. It might have been Turner, open in the end zone early, and the ball was just there a little late, which I think that's something you would expect to happen with the rookie, and gave time for the defense to close, and 2 defenders got there. One of them knocked it away. And then the second attempt in the red zone was a throwaway towards the corner that I really didn't mind at all, because one of those balls where there was fairly tight coverage and he just didn't put it at risk. And again, if it's an end of the half situation, which is what it was, that's what I want my quarterback to do. Either my guy's going to catch it or it's out of bounds. It's not going to get intercepted. You're not going to lose the points. Then the second team kicker missed the 36-yard field goal, but he put them in position to make that happen. It was a good drive. It wasn't a great drive. He didn't get the touchdown, obviously. But again, it's in shorts. So I don't know how much you take from that. For me, the biggest takeaway was that a lot of the march down the field was that intermediate short stuff that he needs to work on. I've also been told by the same people that said that the defense was winning, that the red zone is where he struggled the most right now. I think that's another thing that you would expect from a rookie. The field gets condensed down there. Michael Pittman's not been out there. I know last week he wasn't out there because of the hip injury. The week before that, the baby was born. So you haven't had your top receiver. Jelani Woods hasn't been out there. Those are 2 pretty big red zone targets that aren't on the field. So you got to take all that into account. But of course, there's not a pass rush either. And, the defense is also playing with some limitations. So all that gets taken together in however you want to take this. But also, there's no Jonathan Taylor. There's really been no run game in the red zone right now. They're not really working on that area in shorts. And obviously, he's not using his running ability. So there's a lot of things that are going to change between now and September in those red zone looks, but that's where he's at right now. And so to me, the long answer to this question, all that comes into consistency to me. Can he be the same guy in the red zone he was in the middle of the field on that 2-minute drive? Can he make that drill with the net? Can that be every day that you see him? Mm-hmm. Can he get the 7-on-7 to the place where the 11-on-11 is? It's all of that. And that's what I would expect from a 21-year-old quarterback, honestly.
I like that, because what I'm about to say kind of goes under that umbrella. I would say decision-making. I think for me, the biggest thing I'm watching in year 1 is decision-making, because in part, I think that's the one that's hardest to work on going forward, like accuracy. We are seeing now a lot of accuracy is a combination of footwork and mechanics, and also partially decision-making. But it's like you can have the best footwork, you can have the best accuracy. If you are not a good decision-maker, if you can't read defenses, you can't have success in the NFL. And so especially too, when you're talking about, and some people you're talking to saying right now, the big struggles for Anthony Richardson are red zone. Well, that's especially where you want your quarterback making good decisions. You mentioned a throwaway where it's one of those, no one's open, I'm not going to force it. Like I said, we don't need a touchdown to tie the game so we can live with a field goal. I'm just going to throw it out of bounds and live to see another day. Those are areas where I really want to see Anthony Richardson grow and continue to have success in. So I think everything else around him is fixable. Again, we've seen Josh Allen improve in accuracy from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. You see footwork can improve as well. But I just think, for me, George, I think the hardest thing to evaluate or improve upon is decision-making. If you can't read defenses, if you're slow to process, if you're hesitant even after moving off your first read, doesn't matter how much talent you have, you will have a hard time succeeding. One guy that I think has a lot of talent that we're seeing not live up to that potential, it's Sam Darnold. In large part, because if you see a lot of reports and you talk to people that have been around him, especially with the Jets, a lot of the knocks about Sam Darnold why did not have success, especially in New York, was that after he would move off the first read, like he couldn't basically process the offense or the defense after going off that primary read of whatever is designed, the guy who the ball is designed to go to. That's a problem. Like if you can't make your secondary read, I think Sam Darnold just naturally has a lot of talent. But we're seeing he's not very good because he can't read a defense. He doesn't know where to go with the ball. And the primary guy is taken away. And so that's why I want to see his decision-making, because I think everything else can improve off that. Like, again, accuracy, you can improve upon, but also, too, if you are very accurate, sure, then you could be a little bit like Carson Wentz and make some bad decisions, but get away with them because you could fit them right in a very tiny hole. But as we saw also with Carson Wentz, it could work, but also could work to your detriment as well. So I'll say decision-making, George, in terms of what I'm looking forward to the most for Anthony Richardson to kind of improve upon and get better at. Not accuracy, not footwork. I'll go decision-making because I think from there, that's kind of almost really the foundation, if you will, to his success going forward is going to be making good decisions, taking care of the football, and then from there, with his physical tools and improved accuracy, I think that's when you'll really see him kind of exponentially improve it and hopefully develop into the quarterback everyone thinks he can be, especially in that building.
And I think that was a big part of what happened in Florida. I mean, honestly, you see him read defenses and you see good decisions at times on film, but then you'll see him in a situation that he made a good decision earlier in the game, force something later, or you'll see it go the other way where he forced something early and then he'll make the right decision later. And I think a lot of that just comes with inexperience. I think that's why when you keep hearing the Colts hammer home experience, all this is a big part of that. You're talking about a guy who had 13 starts since high school.
Right.
So, the next start's going to be his 14th since he was a high school senior. And he only played quarterback for 2 years in high school. So he's very young at the position. He's very young in life, and he's very young as a quarterback. He wasn't one of these guys who was quarterback from 7th grade and had private quarterback coaches and was just drilling as an NFL guy, basically as an 8th grader on up. That's not his background. And I think that's why you keep hearing the Colts say again and again, the thing he lacks most is experience. I think all this stuff we're talking about comes with it. Consistency, decision-making, accuracy, footwork, all that comes with reps, getting out there, getting that muscle memory, being able to take it from one rep to the next, and then from 1 week to the next, and then from 1 month to the next, and then from 1 season to the next. That's what you want to see from him. And I think it all comes down to him getting those reps under his belt. I think one thing, when you're talking about Darnold that stood out to me, one thing with Richardson is that's where the athleticism is really important for him, where he's going to be able to say, hey, you know what? If the first read's not there, I think early on, as he's growing in that, I would even coach him to say, the first read's not there, take off or run around. If it's something where, extending the play will make that guy get open. There's a lot of things he can do that the average quarterback can't do when the play doesn't unfold the way that you necessarily think it will. So I might only give him 2 reads early on and say, hey, like in college, simplify that offense. Here's half the field. Read this half the field. And if it's not there, use your legs and get us yards that way, and we'll live the next down. That would probably be my approach with him early on and let that grow each year. I think that's a little bit of what Buffalo did with Josh Allen, was say, look, you're a very athletic guy. We're going to work that in, and we'll let the passing game grow as you naturally grow with it.
And especially too with Josh Allen, you saw early on, obviously had accuracy issues, but also too his decision-making was, like I said, very shaky. So that's almost kind of, if you're Buffalo, sure, he looked to pass, but sometimes, again, he would force it into windows that were not there. If the defense is giving you an 8-yard scramble on 2nd and 10, go take it. You don't have to hit a home run basically every single play. And now you're starting to see, that eventually sunk in with Josh Allen, where his decision-making has improved now, again, especially in the red zone. I think he has a little too many turnovers, and that's obviously something Anthony Richardson wants to not replicate with Josh Allen, but obviously that's been a fairly popular comp. But it's like, you even look around the NFL, like, I think part of what makes the 2 best quarterbacks right now in the NFL and Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow so tough to stop is, I would say, decision-making, especially for Joe Burrow. A lot of comparisons for him, or at least a lot of Bryce Young comparisons, I should say, were Joe Burrow, because they were very similar in terms of they are elite processors. Now, there's nothing physically Joe Burrow does that's better than Patrick Mahomes, but he just knows where to go with the ball every single time, that it's so hard for a defense to slow him down. Also helps when you have great receivers on the outside as well making plays, which is why the Bengals the last 2 years, especially, have had a great offense. And so if you look at Richardson, who physically, right, I would say is arguably maybe the biggest specimen in terms of arm strength, speed, size, everything that you want, you can have the decision making of Joe Burrow plus the playmaking ability of Patrick Mahomes. Like, again, we were talking about this in the pre-draft process, George. It's not hyperbole to say in 5 years he could be the best quarterback in the NFL. That's a huge if, obviously, if he could put everything together. But I think that starts with knowing where to go with the ball, making good decisions, reading defenses, and if he, you're back there and say, okay, they take this away, but now I know that means on the backside, this guy's open. Or if I know, but they're playing deep, I know now all of a sudden, if I wait a second, maybe the middle open up, I can run 10 yards. Like, if you constantly or consistently, I should say, make good decisions, I think everything else from there can kind of almost be like the world is your oyster sort of thing.
I think that's why the Colts are so excited about him. When you hear, all the talk about how much they like this kid, it's a work ethic first and foremost. I mean, even just once a week, we see that as the media out there, just how much he wants it. I mean, that video, go back to the video you're talking about with the net and watch his celebration when the first one went in. He was first quarterback who made it that day. That was part of it. Minshew and Ellinger had missed on their attempts earlier. And so, that was part of it too. But I think also he's working on what you don't see in that video. I think is a big part of this moving forward. As soon as that ball goes in the net, Gardner Minshew's arms went up in the air like a touchdown. He's like, yeah, he's rooting for this kid. And I think that's an important part of this too. I mean, people want to know how that relationship is. They obviously worked out together in July. He was as excited as Anthony was that the rep went well. So I think that's a good sign moving forward. I think it's what you expect from Minshew from what we've seen from him elsewhere, but good to see that he's probably Richardson's biggest cheerleader out there on the field. I think what the Colts see is that work ethic, the commitment that he has in general to the game, which we know Steichen talked about that throughout the draft process, how important that was. And then these physical skills that are off the charts. I think they feel like when they look at the tape in Florida, he's capable of doing all those things you were just talking about. Now it's getting in there. And I think that's where I think it goes back to the Sam Darnold situation. You don't know how much of his problems in New York were due to the offensive line he had to play with early on, the switching of coaches, the switching of offenses. It didn't help his development. You know what I mean? And not that the Colts are going to switch coaches, hopefully, and not that they're going to switch offensive schemes with him, but we've talked about that offensive line again and again and how important it is for them not to create bad habits. And to me, when I think of Sam Darnold, the most indelible image in my head is the seeing ghost moment, on Monday Night Football. Why did that happen? Because there were jailbreaks every other snap, and he was taking his eyes away from downfield, watching the pass rush. The Colts cannot allow that to happen with Anthony Richardson, and they also can't allow him to become Andrew Luck and become a piñata and just wait for that to burst and end your career early. So I think the offensive line remains the most important element of this for Richardson that's outside of his control. The Colts feel good, I think, with everything that's inside of his control. Now Steichen's got to get him there. Cam Turner's got to get him there. Jim Bob Cooter's got to get him there. That's why they're here, to get that kid to that ceiling. But the offensive line's got to protect him and let him get there as well.
And I think everything we just talked about, working on decision-making, trying to be more consistent, building an offensive line, like I said, that can hold up in protection and allow him to go through the reads like a normal quarterback would. I think it all ties into the news we got on Friday as well, George, about the Colts now holding 2 joint practices this year. First one is going to be before their Bears, I was going to say spring training game, preseason game.
Same thing.
In baseball mode at this point. And then the following week on a short week, going to Philly to battle the Eagles. I believe, George, correct me if I'm wrong, first time the Colts are ever doing 2 joint practices in a training camp. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think somebody said it's the first road joint practices since 2000. And the last one, just give you an idea of how long ago it was, the last road joint practice was in Nashville with the Titans because they weren't in the same division. That's a while.
That is a
time ago in the NFL.
Cow. That it is. Almost 25 years. Holy cow. But I think that's part of the reason why they're doing it. Competition, and giving, especially a lot of young players and big time question marks, extra competition going, in training camp to make them earn instead of just kind of going through the same monotonous drills against teammates over and over and over again.
I think
love
you're
it.
seeing more. Oh, absolutely. And you're seeing more and more teams do this, in part because of the preseason, they're still trying to figure out this 3-week preseason, how they want to run it. You're seeing less and less starters play, even any snaps in these preseason games. A lot of that is because you get into these joint practices, you can script a lot of that. You get the situations you want. You can get as many reps as the other team will agree to of trying to get in that specific situation. And you got the quick whistle, plus your quarterback's wearing a red jersey. If your number one goal this preseason is to get experience for Anthony Richardson, and that's no mystery. The Colts have said that. That's out there. They're on record with that aim. What better way than to have these two joint practices where he can't be hit and he's going to get looks at two different defenses that are not his own defense. One of them is the best team in the NFC, maybe the best team in the NFL coming into this year. The Eagles are on a very short list of Super Bowl championship contenders. Get out there, get reps against those guys. Like you said, all the receivers that are working for jobs, all the offensive linemen, everybody. The defense is going to face a mobile quarterback in Justin Fields. They're going to face an MVP candidate in Jalen Hurts. It's just good experience for all these guys. And I think there's some comfort level from a coaching standpoint. You've got the former defense coordinator in Matt Eberflus in Chicago, who knows a lot of this roster, not the coaches so much,
Right.
but he knows a lot of these players. And so there's got to be some comfort level there. He's not going to go out try to hurt Kenny Moore, for instance. He's not, he's going to be trying to protect everybody. And then on the other side, you've got Nick Sirianni, who was the former offense coordinator here and was Shane Steichen's boss the last 2 years.
Right.
And I think you feel like there's a real comfort level between the coaching staffs too, that hopefully there's no Aaron Donald helmet swinging moments as a result of that.
I actually forgot about that. That's a good point. You're right. You think the familiarity there maybe will hopefully kind of prevent any melees from breaking out. But I think, and two, you hear so many coaches now, George, over the last few years, especially talk about how they value and think joint practices are more productive than the actual preseason game. You don't have to be as vanilla because not as many people are watching, right? The joint practices are not televised. So basically, outside of the reporters and the fans that are there, nothing is really scheme-wise getting out. So you can kind of run your offense more openly than you would, like I said, on a TV, on a preseason game that's televised and every team has access to. So you can give Richardson, like I said, the reps that he needs now twice with two joint practices. And two, George, I think it also helps. Look, the last few times the Colts have done joint practices, the Browns 1 year, the Lions 1 year, like the Bears even this year coming on in. Like, no disrespect to them, but they are obviously not the creme de la creme of the NFL. Like you just mentioned, you could argue the Eagles right now are the best built roster in the entire league. So there will be no doubt for this team that's filled with a lot of question marks of young players going in. If you get your ass kicked in joint practices, which they probably will, you know where you stand and you know basically what it takes to get to that elite level. So I think it's also, before the season starts, almost like a nice thermometer check to basically take the temperature of the team and see kind of where you're at, and also kind of serve as a reminder of, hey, look, we think we're in a good spot. That's the standard over there on that sideline. And look how much we got to work to get there. I think it also, in an easier way, kind of underscores and makes Shane Steichen's job a little easier in trying to get the message through.
Yeah, it's a wake-up call. When you go over there and you see the Eagles, and you also see the way they work. And,
Right.
They're going to be doing a lot of the same things offensively that the Colts are doing, obviously. I mean, there's obviously going to be carryover between these two franchises. So, any minute that Richardson's not on the field for the Indianapolis offense, look over at the other field and see what Jalen Hurts is doing is probably not a bad situation for him either. But I think, to your point, one of the big things to me for him, they can open up his playbook and he can run more of the offense than he will in the preseason, but he's also going to get better defensive looks. You're obviously not going to get the pass rush element. That part of it is not there. There'll be pressure. He just won't get hit, but they'll be guys in his face. And I'm sure against Philadelphia, that'll definitely happen. But you're going to get coverages and there's going to be more complex looks from the defense. And I think that's an important thing too. You know, those guys out there in the preseason are running vanilla stuff. I mean, honestly, we all know the preseason is just trying to figure out if guys can play. And that's what you're really trying to do. Get the guys you know can play, a little bit of juice, get their muscles running a little bit, give them a little bit of a sweat, and get them off field. And you're just trying to find with these other guys, how can we use them? Can they make it in this league? And so you're not trying to trick the other team. You're trying to find out, can they run basic stuff? And from a Richardson standpoint, I don't know how much he's going to get from that in a preseason game. He'll play, they're all going to play a little bit, but I don't think you're going to get as much from that with a rookie quarterback. Whereas you go in there with Chicago and Philadelphia, and they're going to throw different, they're going to disguise coverages. They're going to throw different looks at you. They're going to do things to try to catch you off guard. That for me is invaluable to him. All of those reps are going to be probably the most useful reps he gets of the year, because at some point in training camp against his own team, he's going to, get tired of seeing the same looks, because there's still only so many different things you can do. And the defense will throw a lot of different looks at him, but at one point he's going to see them all. And two, they know what he's going to do too. So it's not apples to apples there, get out there with the Bears and the Eagles. You're going to get a game feel without getting hit. It's really, in a lot of ways, an ideal situation for a rookie QB.
I'm really excited the Colts are doing it. You hear Shane Steichen, when announcing the joint practices or the second joint practice, talk about, adding competition, which again, I think this team absolutely needs. And I think, like you said, it only, especially for a young rookie quarterback, only going to help his development, only going to, I think, hopefully help his growth going forward here. Maybe get him, again, on a faster track than you would, like you said, if you're going against the same Colts defense every single day in training camp. And by week 3, you basically know, like, oh, I know exactly what every look is going to be. You can even probably distinguish a few, pre-snap disguises. Oh, I know he's over here, but that means he's going to drop. Like, after a while, like I said, just same old, doesn't really help your development or help expose you to different things, which absolutely these two joint practices will do. So I'm really excited for that. And I think the fans too that are in attendance, both in Philly and the one here in Indy later on, or I guess technically earlier in training camp, but later on from the date we're recording, we'll definitely also get a great view as well. I got a theory I want to run by you, George. And that theory has to do with Anthony Richardson and the hype train right now. As you mentioned, we were just talking before. Actually, I don't think we mentioned. So let's just say for the OTAs you were at on Friday, when you saw the first team was run for the 11-on-11s by Gardner Minshew, strictly. The second team was run by Anthony Richardson. Now, in the first OTAs we had at this point 2 weeks ago, it was split first team reps, Anthony Richardson, Gardner Minshew, basically even. I got a theory I want to run by you that why all of a sudden, at least in the second visual or public, I guess, OTA practice, that Richardson was quote unquote demoted to only the second team. I think Shane Steichen is trying to shield Richardson and prevent the hype from getting too out of control. We led the podcast with a video going viral of Anthony Richardson doing 2 throwing drills in which he hit the net both times, and people are popping off on Twitter. And it's like a well-circulated video of, wow, look at Anthony Richardson. Look how good he's doing in a drill that literally has him scrambling and throwing the ball to 2 nets. That's it. So if you're Steichen and you run him out there the first team and he's lighting it up in the public portion, let's say of OTAs, I think for him, he's a little nervous that maybe the hype can get so out of control that people forget how much work there still is to do. And then all of a sudden expectations rise a lot higher than they should. I wonder, and I would bet, George, the reasoning because Richardson only was with the second team, at least on the second OTA that was available to the media on Friday, I think in a way, Steichen's trying to limit the hype, because even if he plays well, it's, oh, he's only with the second team, still second stringers, not the first team. You can kind of still manage expectations and not let the train basically get to the point where it's a runaway. And now all of a sudden people are disappointed if he has an up and down rookie year like most of us expected when he was drafted. Would you you were obviously there and you were there both times. Would you take anything out of that? Like, I know we still don't know Shane Steichen very well, so we don't really know his tendencies or his method to the madness, but I don't think it was an accident that Richardson was only with the second team for a lot of the portion that was available to the public. And I do think, or at least the media, and I do think in a way it's purposeful to limit the hype, to not allow kind of fans to get expectations higher than they really should be.
It's definitely not an accident. I mean, there's nothing that happens out there that they're not in full control of. It's not an accident when the entire 11-on-11 drill is going away from us and the players are lined up behind the play and blocking our view either. Those
Really, they did that,
none
huh?
of that is that's happened way back to Jim Caldwell since I've been around.
Paranoid NFL coaches, George, they don't go away.
There is no more paranoid group of people on this planet than NFL coaches. And they'll do that. It's you get other ones that they're coming at you, but I'm sure there's specific reasons they don't want us getting a really good view of that particular set of plays, and so we don't. But I think it's a little bit of what you were saying. I will say, Steichen was quick in his presser to say this is no demotion, nothing's changed. It's just the way it shook out, which I don't believe. It didn't just shake out that way. He didn't just randomly spin the Rolodex and this is how it came out.
Oh, it just happened to be that way?
It just happened to be that way. But he was mentioning that like some of the 7-on-7, some of the other drills, they were still splitting reps. That there were, I guess, times that Anthony Richardson was throwing the first team receivers during that practice is what he's trying to point out. Also, the first team is in flux right now in the sense that Michael Pittman's not out there, Jelani Woods is not out there, Jonathan Taylor's not out there. Braden Smith was back on the field, but he wasn't doing 11-on-11 work. So Freeland was the right tackle again during those things. So it's not like it's not like there's 11 starters cemented anyway. The first team is still almost a subjective kind of a term. So I think they're definitely playing with that. I think they're definitely using that. And we talked about before we recorded, it's possible that on Wednesday and Thursday it was even, or Richardson had all of the 11-on-11 stats. We weren't there. We wouldn't see it. But I also think part of this too, I think part of it's what you were talking about. I think part of it is trying to keep the mystery out there, trying to keep other teams guessing. Hey, wait a minute. He was working the second team. It will be Minshew week 1. One of the few things they have right now as an advantage coming into this year, teams don't know exactly what this offense is going to look like because obviously Shane Steichen hasn't run it here in Indy. And teams don't know who that quarterback's going to be. Specifically, the Jaguars don't know who that quarterback's going to be on September 10th. If I'm Shane Steichen, I'm taking that up to 1 p.m. Someone's going to run out there after the opening kickoff, and that's when you'll find out who the starter is. And I think this is part of it. He had second team snaps, so maybe it's not him. Maybe it's Minshew. I think it's all just part of the gamesmanship. And this time of year doesn't matter. I mean, he's getting reps. He's still getting a lot of snaps. That's what matters. I don't know if it matters that much who he's getting them with. As we talked about before, there's not a pass rush. You're not really – the defense is playing tight coverage, but they're not physical. They're not pressing at the line of scrimmage. They're not – it's not – they're in shorts. It's not an NFL kind of situation. So if you're going to play games, this is the time of year to play games, I guess is my point there. Also,
you're right. And I think I should have prefaced or at least included in my theory that there's no reason to freak out right now. Like that's probably what I should have led with thinking that. And like then going into the explanation is that right now, like I said, with him taking second team reps only in the second media availability of OTAs, to me, there's no reason to panic. No reason to think right now that all of a sudden there's no chance of him starting week number 1, in large part because, like I said, 1, it's June. It really does not matter. Number 2, this is the last chance for Shane Steichen, like I said, to keep the mystery still on, because this is the last chance he still has control over the media. There's 10 OTA practices, 3 are available. So you got to think basically, 66%, just strictly math there, or 70% really, is unseen still. So if you wanted to, you could, for 70% of OTAs, split first team reps or even give all the first team reps to Anthony Richardson. No one's going to find out. The hype is not going to be there. And the 3 practices, the media are there. Like I said, he's still getting equal reps. It's just who he's repping with is different. But even if, you want to put him as a second string guy just to kind of temper expectations in the 3 media practices that are open, I can absolutely see Shane Steichen doing that in large part to kind of slow the hype train down. There's also too, you think mini camp, was it 3 days of mini camp, George? And all
Yep,
three
3
are
days.
open to the media, right?
All 3 are open, so that'll be a different. I'm looking forward to that because we haven't seen him do back-to-back days since rookie minicamp, and rookie minicamp is kindergarten. I mean,
Yeah.
you're just trying to get out there, and this is how we practice. They're literally practicing to learn how to practice, and so there's not a lot of takeaway there. And now you're going to get 3 straight days with the veterans. It's because, again, what's the most important thing we've been talking about all year with him? Improvement. What's he doing from one day to the next? Be the first chance to kind of get to see that over a 3-day span.
And with mini camp being open, obviously training camp is open every single day. So this is like the last chance for Shane Steichen to kind of, again, kind of hide as much and keep as much down. So that's why I don't think there's a reason to panic or freak out if you're a Colts fan right now to think, oh my God, Richardson, he's probably not going to start week 1. This is ridiculous. He was splitting first team reps in the first week of OTAs. Now he's demoted. Like his progress is not, there's no reason to panic. No reason to panic whatsoever. I think there's, like we kind of talked about before, Shane Steichen is someone who seems to have everything done with a purpose. I don't think there's a rep where he doesn't know exactly who is going at this specific time and who he's throwing to. There's nothing that's left to chance or quote unquote random of that's just how the reps worked out. He's no dummy. No NFL coaches really ever operate that way. There's a method to every single thing they do. My guess is that is to kind of, again, slow the hype train and not allow, kind of almost protects Richardson to not allow the hype get too high. And also in a way, George, protect Steichen as well a little bit because look, he is tied to the quarterback. And there's this perception, as we know, even though perception truly is not reality, to a lot of fans, perception is reality. And if Richardson is lighting it up in air quotes for during these drills and these packed practices with no pads on, all of a sudden, then you get to training camp and he's regressing or get to the season and it's not looking as good as it does in June. Fair or not, fans will have a warped perception of what they should expect and they get frustrated quicker. You forget all of a sudden now what you heard in March and April of he has a long time to develop. And it goes, why isn't he producing? And in a sense, if you're Steichen, you're kind of almost in a way protecting your own job by limiting expectations and giving Richardson, I think, the best chance to succeed.
And I don't think it's coincidence that Chris Ballard spent a lot of the preseason talking about trying to keep expectations in check, that he thinks in the past couple of years, there was maybe a little bit too much talk about Super Bowls or long playoff runs or whatever during this time of year and not enough focus on just getting better and being ready for week 1. You look at the starts they've gotten off to. They haven't won an opener since 2014, something ridiculous like that. So there's something to that, or 2013, I think is when they won their last opener. So a decade now since they've won in week 1. You can't, that's, you got to do everything in your power to try to fix that. And I also think part of this element is there is competition here. It is possible Minshew will start, the season as under center. And so I think that's part of this element too. Give him those first team reps because he might be the starter. And so we'll see how it all works out. But like you said, it's June and it is absolutely the last chance that these teams have until season starts to hide what they're doing. From after Wednesday, when they wrap, from the rest of the year that we see until training camp ends at the end of August, everything's gonna be open. It's all out there. So yeah, you'll know then. And my guess is there'll be split reps there because you're going to try to keep as much of that mystery as you can. And I think one of the things about this competition, and we talked about this really when he got drafted, you got to make it clear to the locker room that it was an open competition and that the right guy won. And part of that is not, making decisions early on. So we'll see how it goes. I can't wait. Like I said, I can't wait to start seeing him on a day in, day out basis just to start getting a gauge of where's that consistency at? Because to me, that's the biggest thing to look for.
100%. You mentioned competition. I think it's a perfect segue to what we talk about next. Competition in the wide receiver room, George, has been brought in. Breshad Perriman, we have a little bit of breaking news on the Blue Horseshoe Pod as we do record this on Monday afternoon. The Colts have inked a veteran receiver, former first-round pick, Breshad Perriman, who has, let's say, to put it lightly, George, been a journeyman now his fifth team in the Colts in the last 9 years for the former first-round pick out of UCF. Look, I don't think this is a signing, George, that we can expect all of a sudden him to be a big-time threat. His best year ever was in 2019, 36 catches, 645 yards, 6 touchdowns. Why that year, specifically 2019 with the Buccaneers, is important to remember. Not only was it with Bruce Arians, it was with Jameis Winston when he had the first and only 30-30 season, 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions. Something we probably will never, ever see again. But Breshad Perriman, at least, was someone who benefited from that. Look, this is someone who is marginally, I think, a depth piece, right? And just a competition piece for maybe the 5th or 6th receiver. I do like this move a lot, though, George, for 2 reasons. Number one, it brings a veteran presence to the wide receiver room that really does lack a lot. You look at, Michael Pittman Jr., 4th-year guy, Alec Pierce, 2nd-year guy. Isaiah McKenzie has been around the block 7 years, but he's really, outside of Perriman, the most experienced receiver they got. Josh Downs is a rookie. A lot of the guys that are going to be playing most of the snaps are still young and inexperienced. So you bring a guy who's been in the league almost a decade, I think helps Anthony Richardson just kind of bring a different perspective. And speaking of which, look, he's played with the Buccaneers for 2 years in 2021 and 2022. So he's been around Tom Brady for 2 years. I think that's huge. Like, even if Perriman gets cut during training camp, doesn't make the roster, I think from now, the day he was signed, June 5th, through let's say the end of training camp, if it doesn't make it, I think those 3 months are still going to be hugely important for Richardson if Perriman can kind of give a few tricks of the trade to Richardson and give him some tips here and there of what he learned in practicing with Tom Brady. I think if that just happens and Richardson picks up a thing or two that helps him improve consistency, helps improve decision-making, helps improve his practice habits going forward, I think this signing, George, even if he doesn't play it down for the Colts in the regular season, to me would be a big win.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely the case. I think it's interesting. Perriman spent 3 of the last 4 seasons with the Bucs, and the one he missed was the Super Bowl year. A little bit unlucky too, I think, on his part.
That's a good point.
But he's been in Bruce Arians' offense, so he understands the whole risk it or biscuit idea. So I think he's going to be an aggressive guy from that angle. He's been around Tom Brady, so he understands the work that he did behind the scenes, like you said, those kind of things. Also, those things that he can kind of, because Brady, much like Peyton Manning, I spent a week with him when they were here in the Super Bowl, so I don't have a ton of experience with Brady behind the scenes. But from the stories that you hear from everyone who has been around him, much like Peyton Manning, in the sense that very hard on the receivers, very detailed with them, where they need to be. Perriman may be able to share some of that with this receiving crew too. Might just not be Richardson that benefits from this. It could be a lot of those young guys who are hearing it, not just from a coach, but from somebody who's on the field with them, about how to run a route, how to be there for your quarterback. I'm sure these are things that he's seen a lot of. So again, if he gets cut in August, he's got, a month of training camp to impart this wisdom on people. I think it's a big deal in that regard. Will he have an impact on the season? We'll see. He's going to be 30 on opening day. So that's part of this too. Like I said, been around the league quite a bit. Never an ultra productive guy. They've got all the guys you just mentioned are probably ahead of him on the depth chart. But I think Ashton Doolin is the 3rd longest tenured guy now in that room. He was 2nd. It's telling of how little experience there is out there. And so just having a guy who's been around and seen it, everybody who we talked to this spring on offense glowing about Gardner Minshew because he's got 4 years in the league and he's seen so much. And that's how young this group is. The 4-year veteran is like Philip Rivers was when he got here in 2020 to a lot of these guys, because he's seen so much of the league in 4 years. So you bring in another receiver who's going into his 8th season, it can only help these guys as they're trying to grow. And I think that's one of the big things with this offense is how young it is. We've talked about that a lot on here. Outside of like Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson and Braden Smith and Mo Alley Cox, you got young guys at almost every other spot on the field. Some of those guys are stars like Jonathan Taylor. They're still young guys.
Right.
And I think it'll be interesting to see having another voice in that locker room. That is a big part of training camp is that team bonding and guys learning things from one another, finding out how did they do things in Tampa where they were expected to win Super Bowls every year. That's something
Yeah.
Breshad Perriman can come in and impart to these guys.
And you hear so many times coaches and winners, champions talk about your practice habits carry with you to the field, right? So if you can learn how to practice like a champion, like a Super Bowl contender, that will carry out onto the field. And like you said, that's why I look at this signing. I don't know how you feel about this, George. Like I view this more from like bringing a veteran presence and kind of helping like I said, the young receivers and Anthony Richardson, kind of helping them in practice and kind of learning those tricks of the trade than even just production on the field. That's why I don't look at this where he has to play 15 games or has to, catch 300 yards, in order to have this signing be worth it. If he just is able to instill some wisdom in a lot of these inexperienced groups at receiver and quarterback, I think that's a win, which is why I kind of look at this more of like one of those veteran present signings and a production perspective. Because like, if you think about it, as mentioned, Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Isaiah McKenzie, Josh Downs, I would say bare minimum, those four, would you say are ahead of Perriman bare minimum?
I think Doolin too, just because of special teams element.
So we're talking about maybe him battling for the sixth receiver spot with Mike Strawn.
That's how it feels. And to me, this thing, he may very well not make the roster. But if he doesn't, he might make Mike Strawn better for having been there, or whoever the sixth receiver is. Maybe it's Malik Turner. Maybe it's somebody else who we're not talking about right now, who steps up and has a great training camp. I just think you see those things happen with the veteran guys. That's what you're hoping for here. Not that he's going to go out and be a guy that Anthony Richardson can rely on from week to week to be, a massive part of this offense, but that he's going to be a guy who's make that receiving group earn its stripes. Make whoever that fifth or sixth receiver is earn that spot. That's what you're looking for, and I think it's something Shane Steichen is definitely been preaching out there. That competition every day kind of mentality. Perriman's just part of that. Is it going to help them win games with his physical ability? Probably not. But could he help them win games down the road because of something that he said to Michael Pittman in training camp? Maybe.
And that's, I think, a big reason like why you do it. I'm really happy the Colts did it. And that's also, it fits the mold, George, of what we were talking about a few weeks ago with the offensive line. Same thing. Like, we're not talking like just bringing veteran depth to push Bernhard Raimann. We're not looking for a new left tackle on the veteran market. There's not a lot of talented guys out there. But if you can bring someone in that gets cut at the end of training camp, but in those 3 months that he's here is able, like I said, to teach Raimann a few veteran tricks and help accelerate his progression, it's a win. I think Perriman can do that with both the receivers and Anthony Richardson. And it's why, I hope Ballard translates that idea to the offensive line as well. That's another area that's inexperienced and does need some veteran depth. We saw Blake Freeland, be the backup right tackle right now. So you're one injury away on the offensive line from having a very, very inexperienced line protecting for maybe Gardner Minshew or especially Anthony Richardson. So that's a concern. It's right. It's bringing the intangibles more than just having these guys suit up on game day and producing a 100-yard game.
Yeah, and it's exactly what I want to see happen with the offensive line. Come in, push Bernhard Raimann at tackle, push Will Fries at right guard. Just try to get that competition rolling and make sure that those guys that got that spot have earned it. And we'll see. Obviously, Ballard's one of the most common things he says is that roster building is a year-round process, and it's obvious they're not done. But I do think it's going to be signings like Breshad Perriman, like you said. It's not going to be guys who are coming in expected to start. It's going to be guys whose job is to come in here, impart some wisdom, maybe earn a spot, but also make the guys who do earn those spots stronger for having had that competition.
I was just thinking off the top of my head, so I may have missed a guy or two. I apologize. But if you think about it, in terms of championship experience, and again, Perriman doesn't have that because, like you mentioned, he missed a Super Bowl team, but he did practice with Tom Brady for 2 years, and the Bucs made the playoffs both years. So at least he knows what it's like to be on a team with Super Bowl expectations. Guys that at least participated in the Super Bowl. It's been Gardner Minshew, or on the team that's participated in the Super Bowl. Gardner Minshew, DeForest Buckner, I think there's one or two other guys that I'm thinking of but like it's very the numbers and the list is very small
It's
in
very small.
terms of
Part of the
guys that
reason
have
why,
championship experience. So you can't it
absolutely.
helps you get anyone in there.
And Minshew didn't play in the Super Bowl. He was just
Right.
on the roster that went there. McLeod, that's one of the reasons when he left that was such a big deal. And
Matt Gay, I
Gilmore as
guess,
well.
technically.
Matt Gay has, that's true. He's got a ring. But McLeod and Gilmore, you lost two guys who'd been there and been a part of this and won Super Bowls. And it's tough, when you don't have those guys, it can be hard for young teams to learn how to win. I think that's a big part of this, but it's also part of the mindset of where this team is right now. We talked about that before. A lot of this show so far has been about managed expectations. I talked about that being sort of the buzzword of this season. And it's another sign that this is a young team with a first-year head coach. They're growing and they know it. They're not trying to bring in win now guys. They're trying to grow as a unit. And the goal, look, if you win this year, great. No one's not trying to win. I'm not saying that. But I think the goal is more about being ready to be a playoff contender in 2024.
Right. And I think part of that is getting guys that know how to win or been on winning teams in the building because there's so little that Samson Ebukam was on the Rams Super Bowl team back in 2018. So I believe off the top of my head, I may be missing one or two guys, but the point is, out of right now the 90 guys on the Colts roster, it was like a handful, 3, 4, maybe 5 guys that have actually been on a team that's been to obviously the ultimate game, the Super Bowl, and don't think any of them have won it. So again, we're talking about outside of the coaching staff, very little championship experience. So if you can bring a guy like Perriman in, who at least has been with Tom Brady, knows what it takes, it cannot hurt. And like I said, it's really something that cannot really fail. Like it's one of those low risk, but it's almost impossible to have a reward. Yeah, I guess if he doesn't instill any knowledge and he's cut, okay, no harm, no foul. But otherwise, it's one of those where it feels like it's an impossible situation for Ballard to lose here.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You're not bringing him in for a lot of money. You're not putting a lot of expectation on him. There's I think a pretty specific goal in mind here, and it's one that's achievable. So, yeah, it's. I just want to see the same thing happen with the offensive line. That's my, I guess, takeaway from this.
To wrap up the pod here, George, we're still trying to learn Shane Steichen. He's not exactly personable with the media, does not like to give a lot of details really about anything. I was cracking up in his media availability on Friday after the second OTA session. Any injury that he talked about was a little hamstring, a little hip, a little foot. Everything in him is little. So he is even vague in talking about injuries. He talks about nothing. One thing we can pick up, though, he seems to be a big avid bowler. He took Anthony Richardson on his trip. They went bowling, and in terms of trying to create some competition, bowling was the activity they chose. On Thursday, to break up the OTAs, build a little team chemistry, they went bowling as well. So Shane Steichen, his preferred, we'll say, game looks to be bowling. If we had a blue horseshoe team building event, George, we had to build chemistry. What are we doing? You had the choice. Create a little competition. What's the game you're picking?
For me, it's wiffle ball. That's what I grew up doing. That's my thing. Be out there playing wiffle ball, home run derby, whatever you want to do. That's now I don't know if I'm gonna be as good at that as Cato June apparently is at bowling. I don't have my own specialized bats or anything like that. But yeah, for me, it's wiffle ball.
So Cato June has personalized bowling ball, towel to rub it up.
Yeah, Julian Blackman was very, very impressed by Cato June and his approach.
Think he wears the wrist guard? Probably.
He has to, right? Like he has to.
Complete
you can't go all the way with a personalized ball and everything else, not have the wrist guard. Come on.
I would also bet my life savings. He definitely has a bowling shirt, customized.
Has to.
June on the back, the Colts logo there on the chest.
How much crap do you think he catches from Reggie Wayne over this? That's the question.
Well, he's bowling 300s. Can Reggie even talk crap?
I mean, Reggie can always talk crap. I think that's one thing for Reggie. Now, is it justified? That's a whole other question.
So you're saying in your team building exercise, you're going wiffle ball, but you're not into it the way Cato June's into bowling. You don't have a personalized wiffle ball bat. You don't got like a special chair as like a strike zone with like your face on it and like a you're
Need
out
that.
sounder when you strike someone out.
They need that now. Now you're giving me ideas.
I think that might be the summer project, George. I would go cornhole. So
Yeah.
that's one that might be my best activity.
You
Not
don't
to
want to mess
brag.
with my daughter in that one.
Oh
She's
yeah?
a prodigy.
Wow. So she's a prodigy fortune teller and also a prodigy cornhole expert. If we see her
Yeah.
on like on ESPN Classic at Saturday 1 p.m. one day, I guess as you're saying, don't be surprised when she's
Don't
in a
be
tournament.
surprised.
All right. Not to brag. And now it's probably not Cato June level customization, but during the pandemic, my sister and I, we did build homemade wood cornhole boards. One is a
Ooh.
Penn State logo. One is she went to Fordham logo in the colors. We have a little logo, we handwritten the Nittany Lion logo. If you ever seen it, it's a little tough to write. I'm not the most artistic person, so it's a little crooked, but we still got them on there. So if you want to, if you're ready, George, try to fancy myself as a decent cornhole player. That I feel like, you want to build team chemistry, you want to get a little competition going, get the juices flowing. Cornhole, let's do it.
That's a big one. That's a big, and the custom boards. That's the Colts used to have custom Colts boards in the locker room. I don't know if they still do, but they used to have custom Colts boards. So that's big in the locker room. You may get challenges from the players. You bring that sport up.
If they do, George, I bet you they'll be out by week 9 because the classic cliches are we got to get the boards out of the locker room. We got to get people focused on the tape. If they're not in there, I bet you by week 9 they will be in there. We got to get the guys loosened up. We got to have them, be relaxed a little more. I love that. The old like locker room game where it's a ping pong table, cornhole boards. That is a classic coach cliche where either if they're in there, they're out if they're losing. If they're not in there, put them in if they're losing. You need to get guys broken down, kind of get a little looser. Love that cliche. Always.
The two big ones were cornhole and ping pong the last couple of years. The ping pong games were getting pretty intense while we were in there at times. So that was fun, but I think no, not a ping pong. Nope. Yeah, not even close. And I'm not messing with them on that. Now, the one thing I think the media wants to get involved in is the Pop-A-Shot machine that's in there. That's what we all want. That's where we're like jealous. But I think the most fun competition I ever saw, and it's been 4 or 5 years ago now, the most fun competition in the locker room was Connect Four. They were pretty serious about that about 4 or 5 years ago. Matt Adams was apparently the king of the Connect Four players in there. And that one was unique.
I love Connect Four. I don't play it anywhere near as I should. That's a good one. I love that game. And that's honestly one where out of all like the games that are around, they don't play that often. I feel like Connect Four is the one I get mad about the most. I can't explain it. Like if I lose corn, I'll be pissed. If I lose Connect Four, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like ready to, it's not good. I don't know why that game brings so much anger out, but it's almost like embarrassing if you get like, you feel played in a way.
The linebackers were pretty intense with Connect Four, as I recall. So yeah, I mean, Shaq, he didn't do anything half measure. So I think that was a big moment for him too. But that's probably the most unique game I've seen them play in the locker room.
Good choice. That is absolutely a good choice for sure. Good. Speaking of good choices, probably a good time right now to end this Monday edition of the Blue Horseshoe Pod. We got another one coming Wednesday. Quick turnaround, so make sure you listen to this, get through it, like and subscribe to the Blue Horseshoe Pod on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. I'm excited for this one, George, already, because not only is it the last OTA session open to the media on Wednesday, so we'll kind of get one final voluntary practice in. And also, too, I think we got some good topics already, talking about breakout players, talking about most to prove on defense. I think it's going to be a fun episode if we can kind of tease ahead to a few topics we're talking about already.
Yep. Should be a big one. The OTA wrapping, only the mini camp left, and then training camp, and we'll be off and running here.
Rookie mini camp in the books. OTA is about to be in the books. Like I said, we are chugging ahead here. About roughly 6 weeks away from training camp getting started here. So the season will be here before you know it. No time better than now to subscribe to the Blue Horseshoe Pod. Again, YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back on Wednesday with another reaction to kind of close out training camp. So have a good, next day and a half. And we'll talk to you on Wednesday right here on the Blue Horseshoe Podcast.